Anyway, well, today we are doing an opening lab. We've got some questions in from Patreon that I'll be answering. Oh, that's okay then. That's fine. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, I don't know if it'll be fun actually, but you guys might learn something. We have some good questions. We got one on the close Sicilian, no, not the close Sicilian, the Accelerated Dragon Grand Prix Attack. We'll be covering the Queen's Gambit Accepted, and as well as playing the rat from Black's perspective, which is D4, D6. We got a couple of questions on the rat as well. Hey, Chess Latte, how's it going? Okay, so with that, let's get to our first question. And first question comes from Ian, who is asking, in the Accelerated Dragon in ChessDojo's view, what is the best way for Black to meet the Grand Prix Attack? Good question, Ian, because I feel like the Grand Prix has a lot of venom in it, and a lot of players struggle against it, so it's good that we're covering this. If you guys are Sicilian players, you do need something against the Grand Prix Attack. It can be weaponized against you. You got to be careful. So let's put some moves on the board. Now, typically when White is starting the Grand Prix Attack, they don't usually play f4 here. They'll usually go knight c3 first, kind of keeping their intentions unclear. But I would say whenever your opponent plays knight c3, this should be a clear signal that they're looking to play either close Sicilian with g3 or Grand Prix Attack with f4, or maybe some kind of like weird bishop b5 line if you play knight c6 in this position. So Ian, I don't know what move order you play for the Accelerated Dragon. I don't know if you go g6 here, or if you just play knight c6. I think most players start with knight c6 in this position. I think it's considered more flexible. And then if White wants to play the Grand Prix Attack, they're going to play f4 here. So as an Accelerated Dragon player, you're probably going to want to play g6 here, which is totally playable. And we'll go into what's currently going on here. But Black also has the option to go e6 that I think we should keep in mind. And I've covered this on Patreon before, I think a while back. You might have to go back and check out some older videos about how to deal with the Grand Prix Attack. But I feel like with the e6 lines, give Black a very comfortable French. So if you're someone who is comfortable playing certain types of French positions, like going knight f6 and d5, then I think it actually gives Black a really good version, because White has a hard time fighting for the d4 square. Long story short. That said, if you're an e6 player, yeah, it makes sense to start with e6 to avoid bishop b5, like Sunny says. Right, so as a Taimanov player, I would just go e6 here, and this is what I've done many times. So that bishop b5 doesn't make any sense, and then if White plays f4, we can play knight c6 or d5 and get our typical setup. But as an Accelerated Dragon player, you cannot play e6 in this position, because White can still switch their mind and play like knight e2, for example, and then go d4, and all of a sudden we don't have an Accelerated Dragon, we have like Taimanov Sicilian. So that's the main, I think, move order danger Black has to be kind of aware of, is this move knight e2, where White can still play a close Sicilian and go for open Sicilian, so you gotta always be ready for White to play d4. They can also play like knight f3 and play d4 if they change their mind here as well. So I would say knight c6 is probably the most flexible move order, because here if they go knight e2, then you're like, okay, they're gonna play d4, I can just play Accelerated Dragon, and obviously you should be fine with these positions. This should be part of your repertoire. And then if they don't go d4 and play like close Sicilian, well, this is a very normal line. I think we covered close Sicilian last month or maybe 2 months ago. And yeah, Black has very reasonable play here as well. So on knight c6 f4 though, once White is committed to f4 playing the Grand Prix Attack, now I think you can go e6, because White isn't really going to be able to get like an open Sicilian here. With knight f3, you can play either knight f6 here, and we're not worried about e5, or I think probably d5 is the easiest move. Yeah, probably just go d5. Maybe e5 is kind of a concern. And if White plays e5, for example, then this knight isn't getting kicked. We can put it on f5 or knight e7 and f5. And this is basically a horrible French for white because black is just having like a perfect development, everything pressuring d4, and basically just like fantastic French defense for black. So white often just plays d3 in these positions. They usually don't push e5 unless they're really provoked. But one funny line that I've actually played with black a couple of times is going knight f6 here, and at any point if white goes e5, I'll actually go back to g8. I mean, you can go to d7 as well. This would be kind of the typical move, and I think here black again has like a very reasonable French. But on g8, the knight can again come out to this like perfect f5 square, and I mean, I would say black is like has a more comfortable game. Like, I really enjoy playing this kind of position. Usually we get bishop g2, knight h6, castles, knight f5, and then our bishop goes to e7, other bishop goes to b7, queen d7, we can castle queenside, bring the rook to g8, h4, g5. Black just has like amazing position. You dominate the whole center. If I could play this position like every game, like I would be 2800. 3 bishop b5 is a move in this line. Yeah, that is something that black has to deal with. And there are different options here. There's like, you could just play e6 and play this, or you can go knight d4. So yeah, this is supposed to be very fine for black. You go e6 and knight f6, and, or you can also play with g6 and bishop g7 as well, just to support the knight on d4. But it is a move that you have to be aware of. Yeah, there's also a bishop b5 in the Grand Prix. White can go bishop b5 in this position. And I think black should just go knight e7 here, and then challenge the bishop with a quick a6. And from what I've seen, I don't think black has like any issues here. I think knight f6 is also like probably fine. I can't imagine this is really dangerous for black. Knight e5, we can go queen c7, and everything looks defended. Okay, so that's kind of an aside for you, Ian. If you're comfortable playing these e6 lines, I would consider it, because in this position, I do like this more than g6. I think with g6, white kind of gets a better version of the Grand Prix. So ideally, I would just play e6 in this position, but if you really want to play an accelerated dragon setup, you definitely can. And what usually happens here, we get to this position, and this is where white has a kind of a big choice, either bishop c4 or bishop b5. I would say bishop c4 is probably the move you're gonna see more often at lower levels. At least it's the move that I've seen more frequently that takes place in like club level, let's say. But bishop e5 is also a big move that we should be aware of. Yeah, so here black goes knight d4. So I was checking these lines a little bit before the stream just because I don't have a lot of experience in these positions. I've looked at this opening a little bit, but mainly just to help my students prepare for it. So I have some ideas, but not like a ton of practical experience. Usually on knight d4, white castles here, and it seems like the main theory nowadays is for black to take the bishop, white goes knight takes b5, and then black just plays d6 and kind of plays like a dragon. And apparently this is where the top players are kind of going. Like there is a recent game, Morozevich against David Paravian, which went d3, and instead of the normal move knight f6, black played something interesting, just like immediate a6 and in b5. So this might be a way to kind of play the position. Then like bishop comes to b7, knight should come out to f6, queen can come to d7, maybe h6, you castle kingside, and I mean, I think black should be fine. I mean, at least equal. Like I don't really, to be honest, I don't really get why white should be better in this type of position. It just looks like a comfortable dragon. So this line I think is not too dangerous, but might be worth it to check out the theory here a little bit. But yeah, this is an interesting idea you can try. I want to focus on bishop c4 because I think this is like the more common move. And here a lot of players play d6, but I feel like e6 is really the way to go. Just fighting against this bishop, and our plan here is basically to go knight e7, castles, and d5. What white is trying to do is get the queen over to h4, play d3 and play f5, and just get this like perfect kingside attack. Bishop comes to h6, and this is how black loses a lot of games, but if black is quick with counterplay in the center, then I think black should be totally fine. About the Sicilian, what variation would I recommend for someone? Tried the Najdorf and Khan, but you don't like it. You don't really have a good counter to e4. So yeah, a lot of the Sicilians are like very playable. I think the Sicilian is a good opening. Let's see. Basically, you could take any Sicilian, and if you studied it a little bit or like got a lot of practice with it, then you could turn it into a real weapon. So any opening that you learn, that your first couple of games are going to be tough because you're just not used to the positions. So it's not really about the opening at that point, it's more just you're playing positions you don't have a lot of experience in, and so of course you're not gonna understand the ideas in the position, you know, at first glance. So I would say the main thing I just want to give you advice on is to give an opening a solid try, like a solid shake, like a full month, 2 months before giving it up. Because like the first couple of games are always going to be tough because you're just playing a new position. So you don't know what you're supposed to do. You're just making random moves basically. And it's like very exploratory. It's very experimental. But you could literally play any opening to like any main opening, let's say, and all the way up to GM level. Like any main Sicilian has been played by someone who then made GM as like part of their main repertoire. Doesn't matter if it's Dragon or Najdorf or Taimanov or Khan, or even some players are playing like 4-knight Sicilian, which is not, I would say, not like a great Sicilian, but maybe second tier, but like even that's kind of good enough. And basically any main opening. So Bomb Cloud, yeah, it's not a main opening. I would say it's a strong sideline. Okay, very strong sideline. But any mainstream opening, French, e4, e5, Caro-Kann, Perk, you can play it d4, d5, Scandi. You can play it all the way up to GM level, right? So which Sicilian you choose is kind of up to your style. Like if you want a really sharp game and very tactical game, I would say you should play the Dragon. I would say the Dragon is like a really good choice. If you don't want something super sharp and tactical, you want something more maybe like strategic, then I would say maybe one of the e6 Sicilians like a Khan or a Taimanov. But I would also suggest thinking about the Najdorf. I know you say you don't like the Najdorf, and the Najdorf can get pretty sharp, but the Najdorf is like a really good opening. I mean, there's a reason why like a bunch of world champions have played it and why it's still being played at the top level. I mean, if you look at the top level, the amount of openings being played is like not... There's not that many. Like most players play e4, e5 as black because e4, e5 is considered very solid. And if they're not playing e5, they're probably playing a Sicilian. And if they're playing a Sicilian, they're probably playing either the Najdorf. There's like a little bit of Taimanov, very little Dragon. And it's basically the Najdorf. Like MVL plays a lot of Najdorf, Grishik will play Najdorf. Or Sveshnikov, of course, is the other big one. With Magnus and like Fabi playing Sveshnikov. So Sveshnikov and Najdorf are theoretically super solid. There is some theory, but the openings themselves are like very interesting to play. Actually, Sveshnikov is an interesting choice too. You might consider this one. So yeah, lots of good options, but it's just about dedicating a little bit of time to it to make it work. But you can make anything playable. It's just, yeah, finding positions you like. Okay, so, well, with e6, we're trying to play knight g7. Paul in New Jersey asked about e5. That could be a move that white plays sometime. Basically, the drawback is that it gives black some squares like f5 and d5. But the idea would be to play like knight a4, knight d6, which would be pretty annoying. So my first instinct would be that black should probably challenge the pawn with d6 and try to just take it. And then if white takes the pawn, queen d6, we just bring everything out. We're hitting the f4 pawn here. I think should be all right for black. But it would be very important to challenge this pawn. If we allow white to come in with knight e4, knight d6, black could just be like strategically lost in 2 seconds. So we got to be very careful. I guess here maybe we can still challenge the knight with knight f5, but okay, c5 pawn is also hanging. It's going to be a total mess. Very important to challenge the space with d6 as soon as possible. d5 also maybe even better, because this one really because this one takes away the e4 square and really kind of forces white to take on d6 if they want to leave that open. Yeah, d5 looks good. I learned the hard way what happens when pawns on e5 are not challenged. Yeah, I think we all have. See, yeah, I try to repeat this frequently. Like, you can't like let your opponent just have a free space advantage. If they're playing e5, you can't just be playing like super slow a6, knight e7. Like, you gotta fight back quickly. So what usually happens is that white castles here, or will go d3 and then castle. And then through some move order, we'll get some position, like castles, knight e7, d3, castles. And more often than not, white plays like queen e1 in this position, and then heading for queen h4, and again, this attack with f5 and bishop h6. In this position, I think black should just immediately play d5, bishop b3. Then there's a lot of moves here. There's like knight d4 and b6, and if you turn on the engine, it'll tell you that black is like better. But it's really not that easy for black in these positions, because white's play is coming. Queen h4, and then bishop d2, rook ae1, f5. White has a lot of moves, and they just build up and build up and build up. So if we're too slow with black and just kind of slowly developing, our position might be fine, but in a couple moves, we're going to be under really heavy attack. So I think black should act very quickly here, and I really like this move, knight a5, for two main reasons. Number one, we are trying to trade off one of white's bishops, which can be a really annoying piece for our king, and that's kind of good, getting an unopposed light squared bishop. But number two, the second, probably the biggest reason I like this move is that on queen h4, black can actually meet this with a really nice move, knight e c6. And the point here is that any queen trade is going to be good for black, because white is the one that's like attacking, black is the one that's strategically better, with our bishop kind of bearing down on this diagonal the whole game. So basically any queen trade here is going to be good for black, especially if we're going to be getting the two bishops. Now there are some tactics that we have to work out. According to the engine, black is, everything is fine here. For instance, if queen takes d8, we can take with the rook, and then if e takes d5, we can throw a knight takes b3. We're hitting the rook on a1, so white doesn't have time to do anything, has to take our knight, and then after e takes d5, it looks like black just has a fantastic position. Knight b4 coming, hitting the c2 pawn, maybe bishop g4. Again, the bishop on g7 is very, very good piece here. So that's kind of the tactical point, which I really like. If white goes knight g5, of course we have h6, and the knight is just pinned, nothing to do. So this is kind of a cool idea. Instead of knight g5, I'm not sure what white should do. Let me check my notes. Yeah, I just have knight g5, h6. Well, I think white shouldn't necessarily play queen h4. White might play other moves here, like bishop d2 or maybe even e5, but then black is going to take on b3, you can go b6, bishop b7, and these pawns in the center, I think black is just very, very comfortable, especially with the light squared bishop. Think about putting the knight on f5, one day going d4, and, well, as long as we're not getting killed with f5 here as black, we're happy. Okay, let's go back. Hey, JustX, how's it going? Thanks for following. So this is what happens when white kind of plays the typical Grand Prix style attack, right? This is my recommendation. I mean, you can look at it a little bit deeper, and Ian, I would strongly encourage you to get some practice in these lines before playing it in like a tournament game, because the positions can be really tricky and you want some actual experience here. So I really like this knight a5 and then knight c6 backup idea. However, I should note that lately, if you check the theory in this position, after bishop c4, e6, the main move that the pros, the strongest players going for this position, which includes guys like Naka and other GMs who don't really play this so much in classical, but will play it in Blitz regularly, is this move f5. So this is something worth analyzing like pretty concretely. Apparently white can do this here. I mean, this was pretty new for me, and the engine doesn't like it at all. It thinks black can just like take the pawn. Yeah, an interesting move to be aware of. I'll show you what my analysis showed. One option is to just take, and white's idea here is to go d3, and it's basically a pawn sack. I mean, it's a dangerous pawn sacrifice. Like, white wants to castle, bring the knight to e4, bishop comes out to g5. There's a lot of potential danger here, so black has to be pretty like accurate. Knight g7, castles, d6, queen e1. This all happened in a game between Andraken and Gelfand 10 years ago, 2010. And I like how Gelfand played it up to a point. Here white played king h1, f takes e4, d takes e4, bishop e6. This was all good. Now if white takes on e6, black just has an extra pawn. I don't think white has any particularly amazing compensation here. Probably he had calculated something against knight g5. I'm guessing maybe just queen d7 and then castling queenside. I'm not sure though. If knight f7, we just have rook f8. Instead, white goes knight d5. And now simplest thing would have been for black just to castle here. And I think black is just a pawn up. If white goes queen h4, black can take on d5 with the knight. And the point here is on e d5, we can trade queens, go knight e5, and we're not losing the piece because we have the counterattack. We have some extra material as black, and yeah, position is just basically winning. So this one is playable. I mean, it's not like just winning for black. I think white gets some pretty decent compensation, but this is a sharp line worth checking out, and I think it is possible. But what a lot of players as black will do here is just go knight e7. They just kind of say like, okay, I don't want to enter like these messy complications with e takes f5. I just want like a normal position, a normal structure. Thank you very much. So let's just play like a normal position. Maybe you'll take on e6 here. Now white, I think, kind of has to take on e6. At this point, black is probably ready to either take on f5 or go d5 and just completely push white backwards. Like, if black can get d5 in, I mean, black just has more firepower. Like, the queen is pushing the d pawn, knight is on e7. Like, you know, white is the one that's going to be struggling. So white takes, and now black can take either fe or de. There are games in both of these moves where, for instance, black can play here, and then something like b6, bishop b7. For instance, let's say d3, bishop g5, we throw in h6, bishop h4, bishop b7. This is one option for black. I think it feels very playable. One idea would be to even kick the bishop with g5 at one point and start using these like center squares, especially e5 and d4. So the second knight comes to c6, and then first knight is going to d4. And yeah, basically black is just kind of controlling all the dark squares. So this, I think, is a very playable position. Or maybe even more solid is to go DE and basically play this kind of structure where we have a very nice grip over the d4 square again, with the queen open on the d file. I don't know, this, I kind of have a sympathy for this one too, because the f pawn gives our king a little bit extra protection. Sure, white has the open f file, but we're just going to play like h6 at some point, and it's going to be difficult for white to really do anything here. So my evaluation is that black is totally fine in these positions. We probably want to go like quick knight d4 soon, and yeah, I think black just has very reasonable counterplay. So long story short, I don't think at lower levels you're going to see f5 much, because usually people that play the Grand Prix Attack, they're just looking for their setup, you know, their castles, d3, queen e1, queen h4, and I think this is what you're going to get. And in this case, once again, d5, knight a5, knight ec6. I really love this idea. So enjoy, have fun, Ian, crushing the Grand Prix players. All right, just Dex was asking, what is the most aggressive opening for white, and how do you study it? Most aggressive King's Gambit, said Archmage. I would agree with that. And how do you study it? Yeah, you can find videos online. Chessable is also a pretty good site for learning openings. But I would say just start with like YouTube videos. There's tons of intro videos where someone just gives you the basic ideas. Here's the opening, here are the moves, here's what you're trying to do. And then from there, it's basically a matter of just getting experience, just playing games, playing it, you know. You lose a bunch of games, you learn ideas, you learn what not to do in the opening, and then one day you kind of develop an understanding for what you should be doing. And so slowly with experience, you can improve. All right, guys, let's go to the next question. From Tim, who says, would love to hear your thoughts on the Queen's Gambit accepted from black's perspective. It has a reputation for being a bit passive, but yet it results in open positions. Are these not contradictory? I don't know, actually. But yeah, let's talk about the QGA. Are there any QGA players in chat? Just taking. Thank you for the free pawn. Yeah, why not, right? -1. Pawn up. SCV says yes. Nice. So yeah, I would say overall, this opening is probably somewhat underrated. Like I've been looking at it a little bit, like last year I was looking at it, and like for a couple weeks or so, and I don't think white can actually get any kind of real advantage. I don't think the positions are necessarily to everyone's taste, but I think it's hard for white to get an advantage. So it's a pretty solid opening, and Caruana was playing this one for a while, so of course he's not going to play something that he doesn't believe is pretty solid. So it's definitely a very playable opening, like overall. But we can talk about some of the issues with the QGA. The main issue is that I just think the positions are not easy for black to handle after e4. I would say the advantages of DC is that against all of the other lines, like knight f3 and e3 and bishop takes c4, I would say those positions are very solid for black. And if you want something that's like very simple and straightforward, all of your pieces get good squares. Like for instance, black will play, let's say knight f6, e3, let's go a6, takes, e6. And then if all you know that your plan is like b5, bishop b7, knight d7, c5, bishop e7, castles, queen b6, rook c8, rook fd8, like if this is all you understand about the opening, it's like you already know enough to to reach a playable position, as long as you just understand the setup. So this is the strength of the QGA, is that it's actually very simple and straightforward. And in many cases, actually, like if white messes around, like they get stuck with this bishop on c1, and it's actually not that easy. Like, you know, it's hard for them to play e4. Then once they play e4, you hit them with c5. Then they have to trade off the d pawn, and basically all of black's pieces come out, and I think black gets a really reasonable game. So white has to know quite a bit to actually put some pressure on this opening. So long story short, in all of these kind of like typical positions, I think black is doing all right. Oh, apparently Caruana said in his last Banner Blitz that he used to play the QGA and got many critics about it. That's interesting. Yeah, because at top level, it is considered kind of less solid than like the QGD, for example. Queen's Gambit Declined, or Slav, or Nimzo. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I mean, e4, this has been considered the main line for several years now, or let's say the most challenging way to deal with the QGA. Theoretically speaking, I don't think things are like refuted for black after knight f6. This is, yeah, how Caruana used to play it. And then white has some options like bishop d3, bishop b3. This is what I've looked at from white's point of view. I think this is also what Avruk gives in his latest d4 repertoire. So Avruk very interestingly switched. In his first series of d4 books, he recommended lines with knight f3, e3 that were kind of more solid, or actually he recommended the move e3 here. I'm sure Dor knows this very well. But in his second edition, he switched to the e4 lines because he just felt like these are more critical. And there are other lines for black other than knight f6. There's e5, for example, but I think you pretty much get this position, right? Where I'm used to seeing this from white's point of view, so I'm a little bit hesitant. But like white goes bishop e6, and then it gives back the extra pawn, and we get this like weird structure where white is like a little bit better structurally, but black has some activity. Not sure how things stand. I mean, it always felt like white should be slightly better here, but you know, if you prepare anything long enough with an engine, you can always find some kind of playable position. So I think that's still playable for black, but maybe slightly worse. Knight f6 is probably the most solid way to go here. And yeah, I was looking at these lines. I was actually using a bit of Leela in these positions, like analyzing, and I couldn't really find an edge for white. Like, I think black is pretty solid. The main idea for black is that you're using this d5 square as your kind of immortal outpost, and so everything kind of plays around this square. Knight comes to c6, knight b4, and then to d5, bishop will go to e7. This bishop maybe tries to get to c6 sometimes, queen d7, and I'm sorry, we don't play e6 in this position. Usually bishop comes out first, but eventually we play e6. So I think knight c6 is probably the move here. And then it's something like knight e2 or bishop e3, bishop f5. This is kind of how it goes. Then black goes e6, bishop e7. Of course, this makes a lot more sense without the bishop on c8. Knight b4, queen d7. Can even castle queenside sometimes kingside. And yeah, tries to use this d5 square. So this position I think does hold up theoretically. This is what Caruana would do. But my feeling is that it is actually, if white prepares it a little bit, it is dangerous. So it's very playable to a certain extent, but if white prepares some ideas like with knight c3 or like knight e2, knight g3 followed by f4, like follows the lines in the Avruk book, it can get very dangerous for black if you're just kind of improvising. So this isn't necessarily a line you can just kind of play like against a strong player and not expect to run into trouble. So you do have to be kind of careful here. Why does white push rather than defending the pawn on e4? I think there's some concrete reasons. Like knight c3, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of theory here. E5 might be a move. Yeah, not totally sure, but e5 would be my my first guess, something like this, like where when we take, king has to take, and then black goes like knight g4, and so we can't really take on e5 usually, and then black just kind of gets a lot of stuff out. Yeah, usually if black can play e5 in these positions, they should. I'm sure QGA players know this. I'm just not super familiar with the theory. From white's point of view, you just learned that e5 is the move because nothing else works, and you don't really question it. You know, when it's this early, you're just like, okay, e5, let's play it. Yeah, similar to Alekhine. Actually, the interesting thing is that, yeah, the structure is very similar to what you do get in the Alekhine. Where black often gets this like uncontested d5 square, but white gets a lot of space. And yeah, so the positions are very double-edged strategically. It's like black has a really nice square on d5, white has more space, and potentially gets a lot of pressure. So Tim, I don't know if I've answered your question exactly. I mean, I would say the reputation for being a bit passive for black, it might refer to positions like this where you don't actually have a lot of space and you're just kind of holding on to your outpost. But yeah, sometimes it can result in an open position. So it really depends on the direction that white kind of chooses against the QGA. If they go for more of a knight f3, an e3 type of line, these are going to be kind of more open. And I don't think black is passive here at all. But if white goes for e4, then this is the real test for black. So not all openings are like this. Some openings, like the King's Indian, for example, that I play, the King's Indian is like always on fire. It's like we have issues in the classical system, white's trying to refute it. We have issues in the fianchetto system, white's trying to like squeeze all the counterplay out of the game. We have issues in like the f3 line, like white is trying to checkmate us. We have issues in the h3 line where it's like we have so many strategic problems. The QGA is not like that. In the QGA, black is fine everywhere except these e4 lines. This is where you really have to like know your stuff, because this is where you have to be well prepared as black in order to handle this. Sure, there's like the 4 pawns attack, like even the sidelines against the King's Indian are super dangerous. 4 pawns attack. Averbach, I didn't even mention the Averbach variation, also dangerous line. The Larsen system with like bishop e2, bishop e3. I don't understand why anyone would play King's Indian. I mean, it's just like a nightmare to prepare. Okay. So, yeah, if you want to play this, I would strongly suggest to check out Fabiano Caruana's games on the black side of this with knight f6. And if these positions are satisfactory to you, or at least if you're okay playing this, because not everyone with white is going to go e4. Tim, I don't know what your rating is, but at club level, or you know, when I was lower rated as a d4 player, I wasn't playing e4. It's only recently I picked it up because I felt like, okay, it's the critical move, I have to play this. But when I was like 1800, 2000, 22, 2300, I wasn't playing the critical lines. And if white doesn't play the critical lines, then QGA is like super solid. So it's a good option to think about. I'm glad you asked this question. It's a good topic to talk about. That's unfortunate, Dor. What were you white or black in that game? Yeah, I would say e4 has really taken off in modern times, because I think the old understanding was that e4 was a dangerous move, but black had several, because this is not black's only option. Black also has the e5 move, and they can even play knight c6 here, and like even c5 is a move. And actually b5 is also a move I should mention that has recently gone back into the limelight. We thought we were done with all of these like b5 nonsense. Nuh-uh. b5 is actually playable here, but the main point is that on a4, c6, let's say knight c3, black has to play a6 here with the intention of sacrificing the exchange. So this line is very, very interesting. This is like a theoretical line. Now white plays either rook a2 or rook a1 here, and then black goes e6, and then bishop b4 check, and get some real counterplay. I think there's some reason why they don't take the e4 pawn. I think they just go e6 first. These positions very tricky for white. The engine gives white an advantage, of course, but this is not an easy position for white to play. There's been lots of GMs and IMs that have lost this position from white's point of view. So if, Tim, you're looking for a way to take your solid, booked up, strategic, d4 players out of book, and you want to take them into the forest, to quote a legend where 2 + 2 = 5, this would be the way to do it. Can be a fun position. I mean, black scores pretty well there. Yeah, there's your open game. So yeah, QGA overall probably pretty underrated, but it's not the most fun opening for everyone. If it doesn't suit your style, it doesn't suit your style. What can you do? Okay, guys, let's go to the next question. Hopefully that helps Tim. And next one is from Laurent. We got Laurent in the chat. Okay, Laurent is asking another question on the 1d4 d6 rat move order. White plays 2e3. What would you recommend as black? And you usually play c4 e5, knight f3 g6, or knight f3 bishop g4. Gotcha. And bonus question, assuming white is a Stonewall player, is there a way to play in a similar vein as black against someone starting directly with 1f4? So yeah, Laurent, are you asking, are you able to play the rat against the Stonewall, like f4 d6? Is that the second part of the question? Okay, I'll wait for Laurent to answer. There's always a bit of a stream delay. In the meantime, let's go to the first part of the question. D4, D6. So I guess this is known as the rat. I feel like I've heard that. Yeah, this one can be pretty fun to play. Hey, Sombrero, thanks for subscribing. Oh, you're saying kind of, or reach similar positions. Oh, in case white plays a Stonewall, like e3, f4. Gotcha. Okay, so we'll talk about the Stonewall. First question on e3. Oh, so are you also asking about 2e3 with the intention of playing the Stonewall in this position? Or with more of like a knight f3, c4, kind of like normal? Because sometimes they play e3 and then they just play knight f3. But often e3 is connected with f4. So is this just a Stonewall question? It's actually an interesting one. Not that the Stonewall is not interesting in general, but it's an interesting Stonewall question because it poses some potential problems for black. Both, gotcha. Okay. I actually wanted to check a line here in ChessSpace real quick. Okay, cool. Alright, so yeah, I don't really believe in the Stonewall overall. In fact, I mean, I think here you're already playing counter Stonewall because I mean, one of the main ideas, right, is to like put this knight on e5. So the fact that you already have a pawn on d6 is kind of a good thing. Against the regular Stonewall, like when white just starts with, let's say, f4 or like e3, f4 or something, what I usually do is basically play like a reverse d4 type of thing. Let's say we get something like this. So I always recommend fianchettoing the bishop against any kind of Dutch system, any kind of f4, putting the bishop on g7 or on g2 for white. It's always made sense for me because like this diagonal is just very useful in the long term. So this is kind of the setup that I prefer to play, followed by like b6, bishop b7, knight d7. And I think this is like a pretty good plan to stick to. Something like this. And then the follow-up is often like this knight goes to e4, this knight goes to f6, this knight jumps back to d6, second knight comes into e4, and then you have one knight on e4, one knight on d6, and that's your kind of ideal setup because you can always play f6 to then challenge the e5 square from white's knights, and you can play like e6, queen e7 as well to kind of follow up. c5 also is a move you can play at any point. So I think black has a really solid game here. And that's what I would recommend just against the regular Stonewall. Now when you start with d4, d6, e3, I mean you could just lose the tempo and play d5, but I don't think this is really the way to go. So I think you can also just play like a King's Indian here. And yeah, to be honest, I don't really see why white should have anything here. I mean, because you're just kind of restricting like both of their pieces that are developed. So, and now it's like, what are they going to do with this bishop? I mean, the best possible, I think, is just they just play e4, and then we're just kind of playing like a King's Indian. So here I would say important move to play is like c5, so that if they do play e4, I guess we get some kind of like dragon where you have some extra tempi, and this should be a perfectly reasonable dragon for black, especially given that white castled kingside and you're not getting checkmated with the Yugoslav attack. Or if they play c3, then I was just checking this, but there are some games where black just goes knight c6, knight bd2, and just strikes immediately with e5. And if this works for black, then I think this is just really good. I mean, because we're just opening up the center, we're making this kind of thematic break, and long term, like this pawn on e3 is just a real problem for white. Pawn on e5 is hanging in all these lines. Black is playing knight g4 and going to be like winning something back, so white can't really think about grabbing any material. Also, this one is hanging, so yeah, I think all the tactics here basically work out for black. d5, nope, no, we take it. We take this one. Yeah, I don't know, maybe if the idea is like here, but light scored bishop is just too valuable here for black. I would say black is doing really well. Yeah. Mirror image of classical setup against Stonewall Dutch. Yeah, pretty much. Dor says, I feel like the Stonewall is a marathon. You just need to improve slowly until your opponent makes a mistake because it's difficult for him to play. Yeah, I mean, they're stuck with this bishop on c1, so it's a problem for white for sure. Hey Neil Bruce, how's it going? Okay, Neil's asking, as white facing the Caro-Kann, do I prefer the exchange, the advance, or another move? I have some sympathy for the two knights variation, knight c3, knight f3. I think that's a pretty simple one for white to play. The advance variation is kind of the main line, like that's where all the professionals go, and that's where they try to prove an advantage And so if you have a ton of time and want to spend like looking at theory, then like the advanced variation. But actually one line I think is kind of underrated is the exchange. Pulsey says it's definitely not the best choice. I wouldn't say it's the best choice, but you can actually pose some problems in the exchange Caro as white. So that might be one worth checking out too. But Caro, I mean, is pretty solid overall, I would say. I think that opening is going to be around for a long time. Instead of knight c6, there's always the idea of b6, bishop a6. That's true. That's an idea that white often utilizes in these positions, is to go here and try to get the bishop to a6. Only problem is that usually they are aware of this and they're going to go queen e2. You can go a5 if you really want to make it happen, or even like bishop b7, queen c8, bishop a6. So the only drawback is that it's a little bit slow, but also playable. I really like just playing knight c6 and e5. I think you just tear your opponent apart here. And if something like e4, then probably takes, and bishop g4 here, or queen b6. I think it could be really unpleasant for white. Yeah, queen b6 looks tricky. Cool, Laurent. Yeah, I hope that helps. Oh, to answer the other one, so if they go like, well, if they go regular knight f3, I imagine this is still part of your repertoire, and you can play your setup here. Not sure exactly how you play this one, but you can play like King's Indian, or more like Philidor, like c6, knight vd7 style. Yeah, so not much they can really do here. What is this? Well, this is d4, d6, and then the question was about e3. Either going for Stonewall or maybe not Stonewall, maybe just knight f3. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely, Neil. Is there a line I like to play against Nimzovich Sicilian? e4, c5, knight f3, knight f6. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely covered this one in the Sicilian book. I think the easiest thing for white is to just play knight c3 and try to transpose to a different Sicilian. Like if black goes d6, you can go d4, and okay, we're getting like knight over for dragon or something. If black goes knight c6, you can play d4, and now we're probably playing like Sveshnikov or classical Sicilian or e6 Sicilian, you know, 4 knights. So only independent line I think is for black to play like d5 here, but I feel like white gets some advantage in these lines. I think the line is knight e5 if I remember correctly, and then there's like some knight takes c3, queen f3. I think this is the point, and we're like taking a lot of stuff. We got a lot of threats. Yeah, I don't know what's happening here. Queen d5, probably knight takes c6 or something. Yeah, Laurent, I'm pretty sure that should transpose to the e3 poison repertoire. Yeah, usually they play knight f3, e3 first, then c4, knight c3. Don't play knight takes b5 as black. Yeah. So this is kind of the one independent line you might have to take a look at. Oh no, actually, I think I got this all wrong. I think the line I was thinking about is like bishop d7, knight e5. It's bishop d7. If we take on d5, they take on d5. And then we go here. There are some lines like this. Like, I think this is it. Because on f6 we have like queen h5 check. Well, I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head, but anyway, knight e5, queen f3, something, something, and yeah, you figure it out over the board. If knight f6 there, queen takes b7, and then the rook on a8 is hanging, and bishop is still hanging. So yeah, I think this is working for white. Right, on f6 we have queen takes d5. And if black takes here, there's knight c7. So yeah, I think this is the line. So on knight c6, probably we just castle here and then look for knight e5. Yeah, I think this is kind of the point. And white just kind of plays for the lead in development. Right. So this was the line. Bishop d7, knight e5 takes queen f3. Very funny move. Oh, f6, knight takes b5. Oh, that makes sense too. Thanks, Hole Hacker. Okay, Patient Chess is asking, during COVID-19, I switched to e4. COVID repertoire, I love it. Replacing d4. You did really well with the Spanish and the Rosalimo. You've done fine against the dragon, but the Najdorf has been a problem. Oh, and you tried the h3 system after struggling with bishop e3, but you don't really understand it yet. Yeah, the h3 system is awesome. I would say that's a very fun line to play against the Najdorf. The main point is you're just trying to gain space with g4. So you want to play g4. In some case, g5 and h4, and you get your kingside pawn storm, which is pretty typical in the Sicilian. Sometimes bishop can go to g2 as well. Usually white is playing like bishop e3, queen d2, or queen e2, bishop g2, maybe castle. Sometimes bishop stays on f1, f4, and you're playing like English attack, but kind of different way. Or it's very similar to Keres attack, you know, knight c3, e6, g4. And then trying to back this one up. There is some theory here, but yeah, I mean, it's a fun line. I don't know, I think if you are playing the Rosalimo and you're coming from d4, so you're like more positional player, Patient Chess, I would say maybe on d6 you should think about going bishop b5 check. This might be more your style, because this will lead into more positions that resemble Ruy Lopez. So you said you did well with the Spanish. You can try this, especially like on knight d7, castles, go rook e1, bishop f1 here, a4, c3, d4, knight bd2, and you play Ruy Lopez style, and so this could be more your speed. Oh, Mickey Adams. He's great. He is the model positional e4 player. Absolutely. I think he's a great player to follow. Just study all his games. Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. Oh, is bishop d7 a simpler option? Yeah, basically that's kind of the narrative. Bishop d7 leads to more solid positions where white is considered to be maybe slightly better here, or with castles and rook e1, c3, d4. It's very playable. I think black should be fine, but black has less winning chances here, whereas on knight d7, it's a little bit more dynamic. You know, black has all these sharp ideas like knight f6. There's that like Carlsen-Topalov game where black played like g5 in the opening. So this one can be a lot more dynamic. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna wrap up the opening lab here. Once again, we open up this service every month to our loyal Patreon subscribers at the $15 tier. Once we get to ask questions, I'll do some research, cover it on the show, and then you can come on here and follow up. I gotta run, but David will be back later tonight for some training, 10 p.m. That'll be fun. And then tomorrow, of course, Sunday is always our big stream day, so we'll be doing, I'm doing the Coach Chess talk show in the morning at 10 a.m. Info on that you can probably find on Twitter. And then I'll be doing Between Two Senseis with David, where we'll talk about the latest week in chess news and Sunday night fights. David will be joining us. All right, guys, join the Discord if you haven't already. I'll catch y'all later. Let's find someone to raid like last time. Maybe Mechanics is still streaming. We'll just raid them again. They are still streaming. We raided them earlier, and we're just gonna raid them. We're just gonna raid them again because they're doing a classical tournament G60. They're covering some live games there, and they're a real chess club. So you guys should go give them a follow. Check out the games